Hello, today on the What If Brigade, I want to do a what if response video. Kramer over at Living Anachronism did a video on 5 things you would bring to a fantasy world, and he had some conditions. He excluded clothing, which is good, and then he made it so that the thing has to exist in both worlds. So you can't bring a gun if that doesn't exist in the fantasy world, and you can't bring a healing potion if that doesn't exist in our world. And he had some other conditions in terms of things that would just kind of break the immersion. But I thought in terms of bringing like a sailboat or a trebuchet, if you get dropped off 3 days from civilization, those things don't really help you because you can't really carry them. So my kind of caveat in addition to his is, it's got to be things that you can carry. I'm also going to I'm going to give myself a pass a little bit on materials. If there is a material, if there's a thing that exists in the fantasy world and there's a thing that exists in our world and they're made of different materials, I'm just going to assume that all works out. Especially in a fantasy world, you've got magical substances and things like that. I don't think it's really a big deal if you've got a plastic raincoat or something like that. Not going to that level of immersion. If that bothers you, you can just assume that I went out and bought the thing using the materials that would have been available at that time. But I'm not going to do that for a response video. So, on with the show. I also made 2 lists. I made one list of things that I have, things that I own, I guess, and then a second list of 5 things that I could get if I knew I were going on this particular trip. Things that I would buy. Kramer did say, kind of think about things that you have or don't have, and how that would impact, your future purchasing decisions. So one of the things that I noticed about Kramer's list is that it was very practical. He kind of set up a situation. You're at most 3 days from civilization, so you have to get to civilization. And a lot of things he picked were very practical in terms of actually getting to civilization. That's good. And then, but I couldn't help but think, okay, once I get there, I'm not going to know anybody in town. I'm just going to be a weirdo from another world. I'm going to need a way to make money. And I think Kramer's equipment kind of assumes that he's going to become an adventurer and make money that way. But when I'm looking, in terms of me, I'm probably thinking more like along the lines of becoming a shopkeeper. So, I thought about, in my 5 things, I thought about, okay, how much are they worth when I get to civilization and I can trade them in? But I still need to successfully get there. 3 days out in the wilderness in a world you haven't been to is a long time. So I came up with the 5 W's in terms of what I would bring to this different world. And the first one is waterproof shelter. The second one is something to help me with water. The third one is weapons. The fourth one is wealth. Remember, I want to become a shopkeeper. And the 5th one is a wild card. And so in opposite order, I'm going to start with the wild card, and I'm going to go with coffee. Now, as an anthropology major, I'm going to say something a little weird right now. Now, you might have heard, the medieval world did not have coffee. That's not strictly speaking true. The coffee was probably in use in Ethiopia sometime after the year 800 AD. So you might say, well, but it wasn't in Europe. Yes, but the world had coffee. And even before 800 AD, before the Ethiopians started drinking it, coffee still existed. People just weren't drinking it. It wasn't like coffee didn't exist. So from that perspective, I am going to say that coffee probably exists. And I'm going to bring my coffee. And I have a bunch of instant just add water coffees. All I need to do is boil some water and they're ready to go. And I have some regular coffees. I manage a coffee shop for 3 years, I'm very comfortable with the idea of eventually coming up with a system to brew the ground coffee. That's not really going to be a big issue. I can always cold brew and filter it if I need to. But yeah, I'm going to bring coffee. This is going to help the wilderness water taste a lot better. It's going to give me a morale boost. It's going to give me a little taste of home. So this is my wild card pick. I don't think this is enough where I would actually be able to sell it because I think coffee is weird enough where I'd have to give somebody a sample, and then each person that I give a sample basically cuts the size in half. So there's not really going to be a lot. And these containers, these metal coffee can containers, are also really useful in terms of drinking water or soup. So metal container, very useful. And the second thing that I'm going to say is wealth. And I was going to say that I would bring my small shield buckler, but then I looked it up, and that's only 10 gold pieces. So what I think I would actually do is I would bring a katana. And this is not my best katana, but it's the one I have to hand. It's still very pretty, very decorative. I think a medieval fantasy person would really enjoy this. But a longsword can sell for about 15 gold pieces, and I would sell this. I wouldn't keep it. Now I do have the better katana that I have matches this wakizashi. And I would bring that one, if that was a possibility. Maybe I could sell them as a match set, get even more money. Of course, I wouldn't do that unless I was able to buy another short sword. And the reason that this would be my weapon that I would keep and the katana would be the weapon that I'd sell, even though many people would tell you that a katana is a much better weapon, is that my training and experience focuses around short, choppy swords. And so this would be the actual weapon that I would be carrying. And of course, if I could sell it and get a cheaper messer, I might do that as well. But in terms of what I would actually use, in terms of what my training is, I get it. There are better weapons than this, but you have to know how to use them, and I don't. So it would be this one in terms of my actual weapon set. And then, in terms of water, I do know how to bushcraft a water filter, in terms of sand and charcoal and plant matter and those moss, those kinds of things, and make a water filter. But I'd still want to boil water, and so to do that, I would use a wok. I have a dishwasher safe wok here, but I also have a nice steel wok, and I won't really need the dishwasher safe one because there won't be any dishwashers. So I bring my nice steel wok, and it will work great over a campfire. It will boil water just fine. It will make stews and soups just fine. And when I get to town, I could actually use the wok in terms of preparing food to sell out of a cook stall, a cook tent, something like that. So I really liked the water idea, and of course I would use my coffee cans to scoop the water out of the wok. Now the last item on the list of things that I own is a waterproof shelter, and for that I would use my Eno double nest hammock tent. Now I can see some people having some issues with that, but hammocks existed, and yes, the materials are modern, but again, like I said in my assumptions, I'm assuming that there are equivalent materials in this fantasy world, and it's not like the concepts of hammocks didn't exist. Now, maybe the concept of hammock tents didn't quite exist, but it's not really a huge, gigantic leap of logic to think that you could have a hammock that also doubles as a tent. That's not terribly complicated. And the hammock tent system comes with cordage, it comes with straps, it all fits in a nice little tiny bag. So I can use it as a raincoat. I can bundle my things up in it and use it as a sack, carry things around. So the hammock tent is really, really versatile. So those are my 5 things. Before I get to the list of the 5 things that I would buy, I want to, briefly mention, Kramer mentioned clothing. And in this case, I think I would be really lucky because I love wearing merino wool clothing. This is a merino wool t-shirt. This is a very expensive merino wool sweatshirt. I wear merino wool socks. I have nice field pants, basically designed for hunting. I've got my leather belt. I think he would probably rule that my multi-tool doesn't really exist in a fantasy setting, but it's got a little tiny pouch that it's held in, and I almost always am wearing my Brahma hat, and I really like this hat. It is very nice at keeping the rain off. It's very nice at keeping you cool. It packs flat for storage very easily. It's an excellent hat. So I would feel really comfortable in the clothing department. So without further ado, the things that I would buy if I knew I was going on a particular trip to a fantasy world, say, I was going through a Stargate or something like that. What are the things I don't own? And so I'm going to go in the reverse order that I went last time. I'm going to start with waterproof shelter, and I would buy a amazing tent, just an amazing. I would go to my local sporting goods store, and I would buy a very large yet very light, glorious glamping tent. And the reason I would do this is because once I get to civilization, it's not like I have a place to stay or a home. It's not like I have a shop. Those things would take time to acquire, take time to, I need to exchange goods and services for money, those kinds of things. And a nice big tent, not only can I live in it for a much longer period of time, but I can use it as a food stall. I can sell things out of the tent, especially these large multi-room tents. They're very light, but they're very big. And, the front part can just be my commercial business. So really good. And the Rainfly still works as a raincoat. It still works as a sack to carry my stuff. It comes with a lot of cordage, little stakes, and all those kinds of things. So glamping tent, definitely I would get. For water, I would still bring a wok, except I would buy a much bigger and more expensive wok, a very nice wok. And remember, I said, I was thinking of starting a shop. I might cook for people using the wok, so I'd want to get one that's nice and big that can basically more of a commercial wok rather than the one that I have, which is a bit smaller, more apartment sized. And then, in terms of the weapon, I would get a powerful and beautiful, perhaps intricately decorated crossbow. This is great for a number of reasons. When I'm in the wilderness, getting to town, for those 3 days, a crossbow is obviously going to be much better for hunting than a sword, and it gives me a ranged weapon in case I encounter any creatures I haven't seen before. And it also would sell for 50 gold pieces, which means that once I got to civilization, I could sell it, and I could still have enough money left over to buy myself a short sword, while having plenty of gold pieces to start my business. So, that would be great. In terms of wealth, obviously if I'm preparing, I don't know if this would really be allowed, but the easy answer is, a 20-pound sack of cheap gemstones, which would be much more expensive in the Dungeons and Dragons setting where they're magical components, and the medieval era didn't necessarily have the exact same access to gemstones as we have today. So giant sack of commercial grade gemstones, just buying in bulk. Now, somebody, maybe that's not allowed. Maybe that's in the same category as a trebuchet. Maybe each gemstone has to count, and I can only bring one. I probably wouldn't just bring one super valuable gemstone because, wow, that would be easy for someone to steal, and also it would just be very hard to find someone who knew what it was, knew its worth, and had the ability to convert it into money for me. So, just because I stop at some random town doesn't mean that they're going to, be able to, say I purchase a gigantic cubic zirconium, they're not just going to be able to be like, oh yeah, this looks like a real diamond. here's a ton of money. So if I couldn't bring a giant bag of gemstones, which I totally would, that would be great. A small gemstone can be like 50 gold pieces, so a 20-pound sack of them basically means that I can retire. But if I couldn't do that, I would get a amazing suit of full plate armor, basically intricately engraved with bronze inlay. That can sell for more than 1,500 gold pieces. That would be and it would be useful in my trek back to civilization. Now I've got a crossbow and a suit of full plate. I'm in much better shape in terms of defending myself. And then once I get to civilization, I can sell the armor, and the 1,500 gold pieces can help me start my shop. And then in the wild card, as much as it pains me to admit it, if I'm not just bringing things that I already own, I would not bring coffee. I would bring I'd go out and buy a really, really fancy tea brewer, something that can brew tea over open flame. And I would become a tea person. I would substitute tea for coffee. And again, this goes back to, I've got my nice commercial sized wok. Now I've got my tea brewer. I've got my tent. I've kind of got everything set up in terms of starting a shop. And of course, I wouldn't want to live in a tent forever. I would want to build a real building, a real shop. But for the first couple weeks, months, while I'm building a shelter, the tent would come in really handy. So this is kind of my 5 things that I bring that I own, and then 5 things that I bring that I could own, and some of this also, of course, depends on the fantasy world. Are you going to Middle Earth? Are you going to Dungeons and Dragons? Are you going to, the Malazan Empire? Wherever you're going maybe influences this list a little bit. But what about you? What are 5 things that you would bring to a fantasy world? Let me know in the comments, and have a great day.